I led 8 men into a church where we destroyed a 400-year-old relic containing a piece of the cross where Jesus died, convinced we were defending God himself. But what if the God we thought we were protecting was actually the one we were attacking? My name is Karim Hassan. I am 29 years old. And on August 14th, 2019, I led a group of 8 men into St. Mary's Church in Lahore, Pakistan, where we smashed a 400-year-old crystal container holding what Christians claimed was a fragment of the true cross. I believed we were defending Islam and removing false worship from our city. I had no idea that what happened next would shatter everything I thought I knew about God. I was born in Lahore into a family of fierce Islamic faith. My father, Tariq, was a respected Islamic scholar who taught at the local religious school. My grandfather had fought against the British colonizers, and my family took pride in our history of defending Pakistan's Islamic identity. From my earliest memories, I was taught that Christians were unbelievers who had twisted the true message of Prophet Isa and turned him into a false god. By age 15, I had memorized large portions of the Quran. But unlike other students who simply recited verses, I focused on the passages about jihad, about standing firm against those who opposed Islam, about the duty of Muslims to confront false worship wherever it appeared. My father encouraged this passion, telling me that Pakistan needed strong young men willing to protect our Islamic heritage from Western influences and Christian missionaries. I joined a youth group dedicated to keeping Islamic values strong in Pakistani society. We were not officially violent, but we believed in taking action when we saw threats to our faith. We protested against Christian schools, watched churches for illegal conversion activities, and confronted anyone we suspected of insulting the Prophet Muhammad. The police rarely interfered because they understood we were defending Islam in a country that was 96% Muslim. When I was 22, my younger sister Zainab became friends with a Christian girl at university. This girl invited Zainab to a church youth group, and my sister actually attended twice before I discovered what was happening. I was furious. The Christians were trying to steal my own sister's faith through friendship and lies. I confronted the Christian girl outside the university, warning her to stay away from my family or face serious consequences. She looked terrified, which satisfied me. I had protected my sister from spiritual corruption. By 2019, I had become a leader in our group. I had 12 men who looked to me for guidance on defending Islam in our neighborhood. We watched the churches in our district, writing down their activities and looking for any signs of aggressive preaching. St. Mary's Church had been on our radar for months because they were displaying what they called holy relics, objects they claimed had miraculous power. To us, this was obvious false worship, the unforgivable sin of treating created things like God. The crystal container had been brought to St. Mary's as part of a traveling exhibition from Rome. Christians were coming from across Pakistan to pray before it, claiming it brought healing and miracles. Every day I watched believers kneel before this object made my blood boil with righteous anger. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever been so convinced of your righteous cause that violence seemed like the only faithful response? August 14th, 2019 was Pakistan Independence Day, a celebration of our nation's Islamic identity. It seemed like the perfect day to send a message that Pakistan belonged to Muslims, not to Christians and their false worship practices. I gathered 8 of my most trusted brothers and laid out our plan. We would enter St. Mary's Church during their Wednesday evening prayer service when the container would be on display but security would be minimal. We dressed in simple traditional clothes and arrived at the church around 7:30 in the evening. The building was over 100 years old, built during British colonial rule, with high arched ceilings and colored glass windows showing Christian saints. About 50 people were inside for the prayer service, mostly older women and families with young children. They were singing hymns in Urdu, their voices echoing through the sanctuary. The crystal container sat on a marble stand near the altar, surrounded by dozens of lit candles. It was about 10 inches tall, beautifully decorated with gold designs, and inside you could see a small wooden fragment they claimed was from the cross where Jesus died. Christians were kneeling before it, some with tears streaming down their faces, praying to what they believed was a holy object. To me, it was pure false worship that needed to be destroyed. We waited until the singing stopped and the priest began speaking. That is when I stood up from my pew and shouted, "Allahu Akbar." My 8 brothers immediately stood with me, and we rushed toward the altar before anyone could react. The people erupted in screams and chaos. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward the exits. The elderly priest tried to position himself between us and the container, but my friend Jamil pushed him aside roughly. I picked up the crystal container with both hands. It was heavier than I expected, solid and thick. For just a moment, I looked at the wooden fragment inside and felt a strange hesitation. But I pushed that feeling away, reminding myself that this was false worship, that I was defending the oneness of Allah, that destroying false objects of worship was my religious duty. I lifted the container above my head and smashed it against the marble floor with all my strength. The crystal shattered into hundreds of pieces, the sound echoing through the church like an explosion. The wooden fragment fell among the broken glass, and I stomped on it repeatedly, grinding it under my heel until it was nothing but splinters and dust. My brothers were knocking over candle stands, tearing down the cross from above the altar, and shouting Islamic declarations. The entire raid lasted less than 3 minutes before we ran from the church and disappeared into the crowded Independence Day celebrations in the streets. We had done it. We had struck a blow against Christian false worship and defended the purity of Islamic belief in one God in Pakistan. That night I felt like a hero. I had no idea that my life was about to change in the most terrifying and impossible way. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever committed an act of violence and felt justified only to discover you were completely wrong? The strange things began exactly 3 days after we destroyed the container. August 17th, 2019, I woke up at 3 in the morning to a smell I could not identify. It was not unpleasant, but it was overwhelming and seemed to fill my entire bedroom. Sweet and flowery like roses mixed with something else I had never smelled before. I searched every corner of my room looking for the source, but there was nothing. The scent was just there, with no place it came from. I tried to return to sleep, but the moment I closed my eyes, I saw something that made my heart stop. Standing at the foot of my bed was a figure dressed in simple robes, giving off light that should not have been possible in my dark bedroom. I could see his face clearly. Middle Eastern features, dark beard, eyes filled with sadness and love at the same time. He did not speak, but he looked directly at me with an expression that seemed to see straight through to my soul. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and the figure vanished. But the flower scent remained for another hour. I told myself it was a dream brought on by stress or guilt, though I could not understand why I would feel guilty about defending Islam. I washed for prayer and said extra prayers, asking Allah to protect me from Satan's tricks. The visits happened every single night for the next 2 weeks. Always at 3 in the morning, always the same overwhelming scent, always the same figure standing silently at the foot of my bed, looking at me with that mixture of sadness and love. Sometimes he would point toward his hands, and I would see what looked like wounds or scars. Sometimes he would touch his chest, as if showing me his heart. I became terrified of sleep. I would drink coffee late into the night, trying to stay awake past 3 in the morning, but exhaustion always won. The moment I fell asleep, I would wake at exactly 3 to find him there, watching me with those piercing eyes. I started having panic attacks during the day, jumping at shadows, unable to focus on my work at the mobile phone shop my father owned. My friends noticed the change in my behavior. I had lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. I had dark circles under my eyes from lack of sleep. My hands shook constantly from worry and exhaustion. When they asked what was wrong, I made excuses about being sick or stressed about family issues. How could I tell them I was being haunted by what appeared to be Jesus Christ himself? I visited the Imam at our mosque, describing the visits without mentioning the church raid. He told me I was experiencing spiritual warfare, that the Christians' prayers were sending demons to bother me. He gave me extra Quranic verses to recite for protection, and I recommended I increase my prayer and fasting. I followed his instructions carefully, but nothing changed. The visits continued with increasing strength. Ask yourself this question: what would you do if you were being visited by the very person whose followers you had just attacked? September 1st, 2019, exactly 18 days after destroying the container, I reached my breaking point. I had not slept more than 2 hours in a row in weeks. The visits had become so intense that I could now see the figure, not just at night but during the day as well. I would see him standing in the corner of my shop, walking past me on the street, appearing in reflections when I looked in mirrors. That night, when he appeared at 3 in the morning, I did not try to ignore him or pray him away. Instead, I fell to my knees beside my bed and spoke directly to the figure. Who are you? What do you want from me? Why will you not leave me alone? My voice was desperate and broken. I was no longer the confident warrior who had smashed the container 3 weeks earlier. I was a terrified, exhausted man at the end of my strength. For the first time, the figure spoke. His voice was gentle but carried complete authority. Karim, I am Jesus Christ, the one whose sacred relic you destroyed. I died on that cross you ground into dust, and I did it for you. I tried to argue, to defend my actions, to explain that I was protecting Islamic belief in one God. But the words died in my throat. This was not a demon or a trick or wishful thinking. This was real. This was Jesus himself, and he had been pursuing me with relentless love since the moment I destroyed what belonged to him. He continued speaking. You thought you were defending God by destroying that relic, but you were fighting against God himself. I am not just a prophet, Karim. I am the Son of God who became human, died for your sins, and rose from the dead. The cross you destroyed was a symbol of my love, not an object of false worship. Tears poured down my face as 29 years of certainty crumbled. Everything I had been taught, everything I had believed, everything I had fought for was wrong. I had attacked the very God I claimed to be serving. I had destroyed a sacred reminder of his sacrifice out of ignorant passion. I was a violent fool who had hurt innocent people in the name of defending truth when I had been the one living in darkness. I surrendered completely in that moment. Jesus, forgive me. I did not know I was so wrong. Save me. The peace that flooded through me was instant and overwhelming. The terror that had gripped me for weeks vanished. The visit stopped because they had done their job. I had been pursued, captured, and transformed by the love of Christ. The cost of my conversion was immediate and severe. My family disowned me within days. My father declared me dead to him. My friends from the group threatened to kill me as an apostate. I lost my job, my reputation, and my place in Pakistani society. But I gained everything that truly matters. Today, I work with a ministry that reaches out to Muslims in Pakistan, sharing my testimony with anyone who will listen. Over 50 Muslims have accepted Christ after hearing my story. I returned to St. Mary's Church and publicly apologized to the congregation for what I had done. They forgave me completely and welcomed me as a brother in Christ. The reliquary can never be replaced, but the God it represented is alive and active, pursuing hearts with unstoppable love. Ask yourself this question: what would you be willing to lose to gain the truth about God?